wonderful to be here with you today. I'm here to talk a little bit about my story about starting the little potato company with my father, and so I'll get right into it. The story starts in 1996. My father, Jacob Vanderscaff, walked into a small diner just southwest of Edmonton, Alberta. And he stopped in for lunch while pricing out some potential drywall jobs in the area. This is what my dad was doing at that time. He was a drywaller. And before that, he was a crop fertilizer specialist. And before that, an assistant to the Minister of Agriculture. And before that, well, my dad was and still is a serial entrepreneur. In the midst of his meal at this diner, my dad overheard two Frisian potato farmers talk at the table next to him about potatoes. Though on the surface, this all seemed unremarkable, it was in fact a moment of the stars aligning. My dad happened to be the perfect, unwitting audience to their conversation, as my dad was born in Friesland, a northern province in the Netherlands that has its own language. I would bet no one within several hundred miles of that restaurant could have been able to eavesdrop on that conversation except for my dad. In fact, a mere few million people in the world actually speak that language. So, added to the fact was that my father's dad was a potato farmer himself, and my father grew up intimately aware of the Frisian farmer's topic of conversation. My dad, since living in the Netherlands at the young age of 21, did almost everything but grow potatoes in that time. Yet now this afternoon in 1996, his childhood came flooding back as these two farmers talked potatoes in the language of his youth. The conversation wasn't just about potatoes, but about the small spuds that were left in the field, those that fell through the harvester chains after the harvester had passed. The Frisian men went on about how great and tasty these were, which evoked a flood of memories from my dad, who remembered fondly the little potatoes of his youth when helping his father out. My dad walked out of that diner that afternoon with an idea. It wasn't long before he came to me. I had just finished my degree in political science at the University of Alberta, preceded by a business diploma at King's University, with the intention of pursuing a career in that direction. However, my dad was determined to derail my pursuit with this little potato idea he came up with. To give context, my dad is a serial business idea generator. And I remember as a child, he was always looking for a niche or a unique opportunity. And rarely did these ideas actually pan out. However, so when he came to me talking about baby potatoes, I was immediately dubious of a lot of things. I mean, is my dad serious? Is this even a marketable product? Do I want to get into business with my dad? Do I want to waste a political science degree in the next 25 plus years of my life hustling tiny potatoes? Well, you all now know the answer to that question. But at the time and the years following, I certainly did not. I often wondered why I was so taken in by my dad's blustering about potatoes. I mean, the potato is not the most alluring of crops to dedicate your adult life to. It's a lumpy, earthy kind of thing that has sprouts that grow out of its eyes. I mean, really, what was I thinking? I inherited my dad's trait without knowing, and I gave up on the narrative I had wrote for myself, and I let an opportunity guide my way forward. But that's not the end of the story, hardly simple as that. It's easy to make the leap, but you got to land somewhere. And so we landed in a single acre plot on the outskirts of Edmonton. And we planted and harvested our first crop by hand, washed them in a bathtub of my dad's apartment, bagged, sealed, and labeled by hand. And I drove our new product around to local delis and supermarkets in Edmonton in my tiny little hatchback under the company name Gourmet Produce. Those days involved a lot of cold calling and unannounced visits to local delis and mom and pop stores. We weren't sure how they'd be received, so we were just looking for feedback. At first, I just wanted to give them samples just to see how they were going to be received by customers, but many delis wouldn't even take the free potatoes. A few did, and it gave us enough to pursue our idea a little further. We had harvested about 5,000 pounds from that first acre, and we managed to sell and give away all of our harvest in a matter of a few months. The response was favorable, not earth-shattering, but favorable enough to start planning the next year. I soon realized that taking a leap of faith on the venture was far less hard than staying on your feet when you land. I decided early on that if I was going to do this little potato idea, I was going to have to go all in. And I was determined to get the most joy and knowledge I could squeeze out of the often laborious, humbling tasks I had to take on as a small owner. I was often tired, frustrated, humbled, disappointment about many things, and I learned to accept these as bricks of character building a better Angela. Our first attempt at planting and harvesting was extremely inefficient, to say the least. We knew to repeat that strategy in our second year was insane. So in the winter and spring, we convinced some farmer friends to help out. They lent us more land so we could scale up to 30 acres. They also lent us a small tractor, a harvester, a derelict root cellar. We also moved from our bathtub method of washing potatoes to an old farmer-built potato washer. It was a small setup, which came with its own deficiencies, including a bit of a wiring issue that would electrify the entire machine if too much water got onto the switch, which was inevitable, of course. Washing potatoes got quite stunning at times. We knew some way or another we would have to upgrade to less hazardous equipment and better facilities, and we would in time. Our increased supply motivated us to expand our client base. We pursued more delis and small grocery stores as well as restaurants. We always viewed our potatoes as a premium product destined for the plates and palates of people who really appreciated good food. Our client base soon reflected that. We realized we were tackling a niche market, which would only attract a certain kind of consumer. And with this in mind, I approached restaurants I felt would appreciate what we had to offer. One weekend, I loaded up my hatchback with our potatoes and drove down to Banff to see the head chef of the Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel. I drove there with high hopes that their head chef would add our potatoes to their menu, and he did. I drove back up to Edmonton with our first regular food service customer. And driving back up Highway 2, it slowly dawned on me that we actually might be on to something. Our days of just feeling the market out quickly waned, and we shifted into taking our idea more seriously. We started thinking long term, and to be clear, long term back then was probably measured in months and weeks. So we decided to expand even more our supply and our customer base. Our next target was the local Alberta IGAs. The IGAs at that time were independently owned and operated, but were supplied by an Edmonton-based distribution center. We knew if we wanted to expand, we would have to shift our focus from walking in the front door of a small business to going after retail. So I cold called the head buyer of IGA and set up a meeting. And the meeting never happened. We never even made it into the office. We stood in the stairway with our potatoes in hand when the courageous rep offered to take the whole crop right then and there. The belief in our product was reinforced when the wife of the director of produce cooked up our potatoes one night and insisted her husband supply all the stores in Alberta. We could hardly do it, but we did, if only for a few months. At that time, we were operating on a budget that was just enough to keep the business running without any left for any kind of expansion, which we now sorely needed. We relied heavily on our friends' generosity and borrowed wash line, equipment, and storage, but this meant we were very inefficient, and more capital was needed, so we made the case to our farmer friends to become more than just helping hands. We didn't have to spend a lot of time convincing them now, as they had seen firsthand the potential of our little potato idea, and they decided to invest, and several remain actually active in the company today. Things seem to be progressing quite favorably, almost too favorably. We're about 2 years into gourmet produce, and our name was getting out there when we were served with a cease and desist letter from a lawyer from another food company who had already incorporated under the same name. At the time, it was a devastating setback for us, the first of many, I might add. We loved the name. We had gotten used to it. We had already invested money in the branding. But as I have come to realize, things initially perceived as a setback or obstacle can often turn out to be a great blessing in disguise. We were now challenged to reinvent ourselves to a degree, And after much debate, thought, some inappropriate name ideas, we finally settled on the most obvious and most appropriate choice, the Little Potato Company. With the new name change, so did our strategy. Our modest success meant we didn't have to rely so much on hustling new customers. They started to call us. It was a momentous day when we picked up the phone and Safeway was on the line. They wanted us to supply all of their Western Canada. Suddenly, the demand for our product went way up. By the end of our third year, our creamers were being sold in supermarkets across Western Canada, and interest in our product was growing. The other hurdle we confronted was the issue of appropriate varieties. The industry was focused on larger sized potatoes, the larger the better. We were going in the other direction, which made it difficult to find suitable varieties for our profile. Our philosophy was smaller is better, and that posed quite a problem much bigger than we anticipated. We couldn't rely on the smaller off grades from a regular sized potato crop to supply our business, as it would produce a lot of product that would be oversized. We had to search out existing potato varieties that grew small or breed our own. And that's just what we did. We started to look in Europe, India, South America for specific breeds that would fit our profile. We were very much forging our own path literally from the ground up, simply out of necessity. We were required to be inventive, and many parts of the already established potato industry couldn't facilitate our unique product. We experimented with equipment used in other industries. We used a sizing machine from tulips and a bagger used for jelly beans. Sometimes it worked and sometimes it did not. Demand grew, as did the need to find willing growers and a facility we could call our own. We needed to get growers on board who believed in the product, believed in enough to take a chance at doing something different and change their traditional ways of doing. In order to accomplish this, my dad became the field ambassador for the Little Potatoes. My dad's previous work of working in the Minister of Agriculture gave him the contacts with farmers, and I'm assuming his heritage helped some, as initially all of our growers were of Dutch descent. It also helped my dad was very passionate about our product, and he had a natural ability to connect to the growers, often in their native tongue, and it served us well. We felt that in order to find room in the marketplace, we had to identify ourselves outside the current definitions of how potatoes were sold. The current way to sell potatoes was just not going to work with our product, so we had to trailblaze in a sense to find the most appropriate way to sell our unique product. A lot of our philosophy was built on the idea of working for what the consumer wanted, not what the industry dictated. This came from our blissful ignorance of how things were done. My dad and I were not long-standing players in the agri-food business, and in particular, not in the potato industry. So we looked at things were simply done through the eyes of the consumer. One of the first things we knew we had to do was change how they were packaged. We had to convince the Canadian government to allow potatoes to be sold in 1 pound and 2 pound bags instead of the traditional 5 pound bag. We fought and we lobbied for this and eventually were granted approval. And this was an industry first. Under the new company name, we became the first company in North America to grow and sell creamer potatoes exclusively. My dad felt the need to be more hands-on in the production side of the business, and demand required more supply. So at the young age of 65, he moved out to Saskatchewan to start farming potatoes entirely for the Little Potato Company. Like the first days of our company, his endeavor was very modest. First year of Spudwick Farm, he spent living in an RV in a nearby campground as they rented land, equipment, and storage. Though very small at first, it gave us an insight to all facets of our business, from breeding, growing, packing, marketing, and selling. Without really understanding the implications of our structure, we became more vertically integrated, which I feel has been a source of strength and resiliency in our business. My dad became and still is a strong advocate for the vitality of the farmers we work with. So after 5 years in the business, we were selling about 3 million pounds of creamer potatoes across Western Canada. We continued to grow quickly, and with that growth came all of the accompanying pitfalls and challenges. We had quickly outgrown our current facility again, and we needed to expand. Became essential. We had to rely on funding facilities to help us. and this presented some very stressful times in the history of our company. It's not always easy as a startup to find a lending institution that believes in your product. And we were fortunate enough to have the support of AFSC and FCC, as they were instrumental in helping us secure funding in our initial years. So with their help, we moved into a 32,000 square foot facility in Western Edmonton in 2004. And with our new home came our new product design. We looked to bolder designs with brighter colors and marketing strategies not normally found in the potato industry. This was well received by both retailers and consumers, and it solidified my belief that we must continue to innovate and only define ourselves by our own standards and practices, and to continue to focus on the consumer. By 2005, we had 50 employees, and we were supplying stores across Western Canada, now also including Costco. Our 10th anniversary was celebrated by the release of our own proprietary creamer potatoes. Our breeding programs gave birth to Baby Boomer, Blushing Belle, and Piccolo. Finally, the uniqueness of our brand was backed up with potatoes that were only ours. The same year, we also celebrated the win of our first major shipping order with the largest retailer in Canada, Loblaw, expanding our sales nationwide to 10 million pounds. The next year, 2007, we moved to offer year-round supply to our retailers. Up until this point, we were seasonal suppliers. We contacted growers in the U.S. to supply us with potatoes. And logistically and financially, this was a bit of a nightmare. But once we got our bugs ironed out and partnered with reliable growers, it furthered the growth of our company and made for a consistent presence in the grocery stores, which was a significant benefit to our brand. In 2010, we had grown to over 100 employees. We were becoming somewhat notable in the Canadian grocery stores, but we lacked any presence south of the border. We had our eyes on the huge market the U.S. provided, yet we were completely unsure of how we were going to tackle it. And quite frankly, we were intimidated, and now in hindsight, there was a darn good reason for it. Once we started shipping our potatoes across the border, we were confronted with problems we never thought we'd face. And this nearly did us in. Unforeseen costs, geographical and cultural challenges made our move into the U.S. almost unsurmountable. The opportunity of partnering up with other companies presented itself many times over the years and was often very tempting, as growth, especially rapid growth, requires capital that we didn't necessarily have. And these opportunities, however, never felt right to me. And this was mainly because the potential partners didn't share the same values. Either they didn't fully believe in the idea of a small potato as a marketable product, or were steadfast believers of an entrenched industry that solely focused on volume. And this way of thinking could not work for small potatoes. So this led to the decision for us to go it alone. As we grew and I felt more out of my depth, I continually sought the advice from other business leaders, determined to learn from their mistakes to avoid my own. But I still made plenty of my own. There are truisms to be found in business that can be found in the stories and experience of others who have come before you. And often these pearls of wisdom are found coming from someone who is outside of your industry. I soon learned lessons come from the most unlikely of sources, and I was always quick to learn. With this, I organized an advisory board and connected with a business coach whom I rely on both still to this day as a source of wisdom and insight. And I love learning, and I firmly believe I can never learn enough. And this thinking extends to the company mandate to always improve and innovate. With our close brushes of bankruptcy behind us and our first year of U.S. customers under our belt, we introduced our first convenience tray. And this product featured fresh pre-washed potatoes packaged in a microwavable steam tray, accompanied by a savory spice pack. The timing of this product proved to be very beneficial, as we soon discovered U.S. consumers connected with the easy-to-prepare value-added pack. Demand kept growing in the States, and we soon realized that setting up a U.S.-based production facility was inevitable. So we soon started to look for suitable locations. And in January of 2017, we opened up our first U.S. packing facility with 4,000 acres of potato supply in Madison, Wisconsin. This year, we will celebrate 25 years in business. With the U.S. packing facility in full swing, U.S. sales now surpassing Canadian, over 160 million pounds sold, and over 400 employees and product found in almost every state and province. I can barely remember a 25-year-old Angela driving around in her little red hatchback trying to give away potatoes to anyone who would take them. I don't think she would believe what her little leap of faith with her father in 1996 would have blossomed into. Never would I have thought that wasting my political science degree, hustling little spuds, would be so fulfilling. I am so grateful for the gift a small potato has given me. Again, thank you for inviting me to be here with you today. Much appreciated.
Come on, Duke.
Everyone, everywhere, deserves to have healthy, great food. Potatoes are a gift. They are the easiest, most nutritious, heartiest vegetable in the world. But over the past century, the industry has bred all the fun and diversity out of the potato. It's not been viewed as fun and nutritious. At the Little Potato Company, we are out to change the way people look at potatoes. That's why we only grow small creamer potatoes. My dad had the idea to grow the same small, tasty potatoes of his youth. He and I started by washing small potatoes by hand in a bathtub.
And then we were still packing these little bags by hand and sealing them as a hand sealer and washing them in the bathtub and that kind of thing. So they would get enough potatoes out of the bathtub, so I could take a shower Sunday morning.
From one or two varietals, we now have several that we've created by marrying traditional breeding techniques with surprising innovation.
We're like a bumblebee with a brain. We're just cross-pollinating two different cultivars. It's something that traditional farmers have done. It's what insects do every day. Compared to large-sized potatoes, we've got something that will accelerate faster, cook faster, respond to the market better, and provide all the nutrition that everybody wants.
Since the beginning with my father, everything has been built around family. Our growers are like family.
We work hard at positive relationships with our growers. We know their families, what their kids' names are, and there's a lot of value to that one-on-one relationship.
Like the people in our plant, to the modern busy family whose rare time around the dinner table together is more important than it has ever been. I'm proud to make a product to serve up to another family. Because we're constantly innovating, we're constantly learning, and we pass on whatever knowledge we can to our farmers who grow the crops, to the mom looking for healthy choices, to the kids whose food knowledge will lead to healthier futures.
What we're looking for, number one, especially in the people that we work with, is a certain passion. It's a passion not only for potatoes, but it's for the greater good that potatoes can offer.
Anyone that chooses to eat the food that we've grown will be the same food that we'll serve at our own table. And we won't settle for anything less.
But at the end of the day, it's just potatoes. Our end goal is bigger than what we pack and send out the door each day. We're grateful for what we've been given. We want to give back. Whether it's the family down the street or the family around the world, we want to help feed the world better.